have a question and comment from, I believe, Brad Harrison. Good morning, Brad.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. How you doing? How you doing, Mr. Fischer?
Hello, Brad. Good to see you.
Hey, how you doing? First, I want to thank everyone for being on the panel, especially you, Mr. Fischer. I appreciate that you are one of the people in our community that will actually listen. But with that being said, I just heard you speak about systemic and historic racism, and part of mending that, a part of fixing that, is trust. And there doesn't feel like there's any trust around this Breonna Taylor situation. And why I say that is the police department and the city always ask the African American community to help them when there's crime in our community, when there's wrongdoing in our community. The criticism we always hear is that the African American community has a no snitch policy, or they don't want to assist law enforcement, therefore crime is able to manifest. Well, it feels like that's what's happening in this situation. We have a situation where a young lady was murdered back on March 13th. Maybe 5 days ago, this case was handed over to the FBI for an investigation. When this case was initially presented to the media, there was a spin on it as if the general public thought maybe that her boyfriend, Mr. Walker, may have killed this young lady. Look, we all know that the police department has a communications department. They have a PR department. There was a reason that this was spun in the media in that particular fashion. The black community doesn't feel any trust when it comes to the city or for law enforcement. And this seems like one of those cases that if it wouldn't have gotten national attention 2 months later, this is one of those cases that would have been swept under the rug. March 13th, we would have expected the city to ask for a federal investigation back in March. But now we're in May. We're just getting that amidst all the national media attention. So it feels like if the national media wasn't paying attention to this case, then the city of Louisville, the mayor's office, LMPD would not be paying attention to this case as well. And the second part of that is we don't just need to talk anymore. We need policy change. In this particular Breonna Taylor case, we see these 3 officers. For one suspect, these officers obtained 5 no-knock search warrants in 1 day. To date, there's only been 6 no-knock search warrants issued in the city of Louisville, period, by LMPD. One suspect was issued 5 no-knock search warrants based on 2-month-old evidence. 2-month-old evidence. One search warrant on the suspect was executed at 10 or 11 a.m., Breonna Taylor's search warrant wasn't executed till after midnight. There should be a policy against things like that so situations like this don't occur. Because what it feels like is that the police department is running around here unchecked, unsupervised, and able to operate in whatever fashion they choose to operate in. And when you operate under those circumstances, you have the opportunity for officers to become rogue.
Well, if the community feels that like the police department is unchecked and unsupervised, I mean, that is a totally unacceptable situation, right? And nobody can tell anybody else how they feel. But this whole concept of police community legitimacy to me means the police are only as legitimate as the community says they are. And that's the whole core of the Synergy Project, right? And so you can say as a police officer, police department, look, we're legitimate. If the community is saying, bro, you're not, then that gap has got to be closed. And it has to be closed with policy and structure and transparency. So you can say, look, if things happen in the future that happen, we at least know it wasn't because of some kind of systemic or policy failure. So when we go back on this, just to address the issue of what we do in the city when there's an officer involved shooting, and I don't know if other cities are doing this right now, but at the time when we put this in place, when I came into office, if there was an officer involved shooting, the department didn't say anything. You know, it was just like public integrity unit starts, and then 2-3 months later, when the case comes out, that's when people start talking about it. The amount of tension that creates in a city when there's an officer involved shooting, to me, is that we've got to address this immediately. And that's when I changed the policy within 24 hours. There's a press conference. There's a group of community citizens that come together to look at any evidence to say, okay, we understand what this is. It's unfortunate, but we're talking about it. And that's what happened on March 13th. And then the coronavirus took place. So that's been a weird thing on top of all these other things. And then obviously this case was linked with the Ahmaud Arbery tragedy in Brunswick, Georgia. Historically, they're in the same kind of category in terms of the incidents themselves. They are not, but that's what led to a lot of national attention on this. And I will never be able to answer the question on would this case have been handled differently if it wasn't brought into the national spotlight. I would hope, looking at myself in the mirror, I would say I wouldn't have just stood by and said, okay, let's paper this over. If there is injustice to be called out, I call it out. But we're never going to know that, right? So the only thing that we can determine going forward is how we act in the moment, how we act in the day. And the type of changes that have been taking place already, we'll continue to make changes when we see opportunities to make those throughout these cases. But at the end of the day, if the community has lack of confidence in it, whether it's a no-knock warrant policy or a body camera policy, that it will continue to result in illegitimacy in terms of a police-community relationship. And that's not going to help us. That's not what the Synergy Project is all about. And that's what we got to keep pressing on.